Welcome to the Two Blokes Chatting radio show on 94.7 The Pulse. Music, interviews, news, and, well, Two Blokes Chatting. Now, here are the two blokes.
5 minutes past 10 on a Saturday morning. This is the Two Blokes Chatting radio show. My name is Neil Butler. His name is Rob Cameron. That, of course, weddings, parties, anything. Father's Day out of 1992. And the voice we heard there was a man called Mick Thomas, these days being part of a group called Mick Thomas's Roving Commission. And if Rob's pressed the right buttons, I'm going to say, hello, Mick Thomas.
Hello to you.
Hooray, got the technology. I'm in Sydney, you see, and I can't see what's going on, so it's all a bit doing this blind a bit. Welcome to the show. It'd be great to sort of just have a quick chat about the fact that you're a Geelong boy, is that right?
I am, yeah. We moved to Geelong in 1969, so I reckon I was there from then till about the early 80s. I sort of started drifting up to Melbourne. I got into various bands and, sort of got on the road and on the circuit, yeah.
So, Mick, did your music passion start at school through Geelong with mates and just tinkering with things? Is that...
Look, Geelong West Tech, which I think is called Minerva Road...
Yeah, sort of something or other,
Heights,
yep.
Something or other.
Western Heights.
Western Heights, there you go. It's got some of a name. Look, without it being like a full-on program, that school was quite encouraging. There was a concert band that did quite well, and went out and played and stuff like that. So I sort of got a grounding and played saxophone for a couple of years there and did a few things like that, and we had somewhere to as I was sort of getting a rock band happening. Various crazy names like the Rissoles was one of them, and Sage, and all these dumb names we had, for a band. We'd just go and rehearse, school portable, So it wasn't like a massively funded thing like some schools have these days, which I don't think necessarily produces anything. But there was a fair amount of encouragement, and that was in the days when bands, rock bands would be playing on a circuit which might comprise of secondary schools and stuff like that. So, if you look back at the history of, say, some successful bands like AC/DC or something like that, they did play in schools. They were out and about, and I don't think AC/DC ever played at Geelong West Tech, for God's sake. But they did.
They played at Fawkner Tech,
and so there was a fair amount of music around. It wasn't a bad place or a bad place to be sort of schooled. And we played netball dances or whatever. Just wherever you got a gig, really.
So, Mick, in those days, did you introduce your own style, which is a bit unique? You mentioned a rock band, but you probably never were a true rock band. It was sort of rock meets folk with a bit of almost country at times. You're a bit obscure. So in those early days, were you just covering stuff and trying to capture people's imaginations that day, or were you being creative even back then?
I was always trying to cut corners, I started writing from a really early age and trying to fit those songs into those are early bands that I was in, this is way pre-Weddings. And then there's a band called the Never Never Band, which is the only band that sort of, we released one single, and we played for a couple of years, so it's about probably 79, 80 around there, around the Western District, and they were always kind of weird hybrids, those bands, and I never kind of could see it at the time that they were strange hybrids, but they kind of were. But I guess, I was sort of buying Fairport Convention records and Steelers Wheel and, I think things like that. That sort of folk rock thing was on the radio already. Or even if you think of like something like Mungo Jerry, in the summertime. And that was in the late 60s. And those hits were they were rock, but they were folk, they were people playing acoustic guitars or playing, weird kazoos or jug band things, but putting them into a more sort of popular music context. And I guess I was drawn to that really early on. And like I say, I think it was as simple as it was sort of cutting corners. I was trying to do this, but not quite do that. And, you know, I was just, I don't know, I wasn't consciously genre hopping.
Yeah.
But, you know, I just, from very early on, had that idea of, you know, I sort of like melody instruments, you know. I was really sort of drawn early on to the idea of having a melody instrument, you know, whether it be a violin or accordion or a flute or something strange like that. Which is, you know, if you go back in the history of rock and roll, there was like a period of crossover from when the big bands turned into these sort of smaller orchestras, and so, you know, and I'm still kind of really in awe of, say, people like Louis Jordan or Cab Calloway, and they were these when they went from your big bands of your Glenn Millers and stuff like that, when they couldn't feasibly have these 20, 30-piece bands on the road, down to these bands that were kind of like 6 and 8 people. So they had saxophones and things like that. So they sort of did have dedicated lead melody instruments, and then that gave way to bands that were just comprised of guitars. And there was things, you know, in the history of rock and roll, like the genesis of like when sort of fuzz lead guitar became like something that was easily accomplished with the stepping on a pedal, which would make your guitar distorted. Really, what they were replicating was a saxophone or a string section. Just by stepping on a pedal, you know, it'll give you a chorus on your guitar, which, you know, so you could put that guitar kind of where formerly a string section might have gone. So you would, and that was sort of, for me, once I started playing, that was unsatisfactory, you know. I was kind of like, yeah, you know, and don't get me wrong, I played for a long time in bands that just were guitar, bass and drums, but I kind of reckon I had it in my head always that I kind of did want to get some sort of lead melody instrument back in there.
So did you even put a bit of mayonnaise on a popular song to put your own little flair on a little live gig, just to put your own stamp?
Oh yeah, we were always doing that, you know. Like yeah, I was trying to think what songs, you know, in the Never Never band, you know, we kind of, because we're a band that played a lot, and we played in the pubs, and, you know, when you were playing in the pub in Terang, or, you know, or Welshpool, or, you know, Bendigo or something, they really didn't sort of care for your heartfelt songs, you know. They kind of just want something that they knew and that they could dance to. So, you know, whether it was like Every Time You Walk in the Room, or, you know, Garden Party, which is a song I still play these days, they were pretty important to have those songs in your set, you know. But like I say, it wasn't until a little bit later that I sort of staunchly sort of went back to that idea of a melody instrument, which was the accordion for us, and that was a really significant part of my musical sort of development, to sort of go back to that, and still be doing it to this day, pretty much with the same guy. There you go.
I think it was Mike Rudd, Mick, that played. I think he wrote a song. It was on one of his early Spectrum albums called "Play One We Know."
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing about all these bands that, you know, you think of like Mike Rudd, Spectrum, Indelible Mertzips, and you think of them as having this kind of repertoire that people know. But, you know, there was times when they were just going out and playing, and this is, it's no different in Australia to America. You know, I mean, everyone thinks that, you know, like I remember having this conversation with Van Walker, and, you know, we were going down to play at Port Fairy, and we were sort of talking, I think we were discussing, you know, Grant Parsons or the band, or, you know, some of these kind of highly lauded sort of American roots artists, which we all listen to, which we've all sort of taken big slabs of their stuff, you know. And I said, you know, don't think that those guys didn't go out and do this, what we're doing now, just go down and play somewhere where they weren't known and where they weren't particularly well received, because they were. That's exactly what they did. So you're doing exactly the same thing now, and you know, you think because you have a repertoire which might comprise a Graham Parsons song, or, you know, a song by, you know, Robbie Robertson or something like that, you think, well, you know, I'm just copying them. But they were the same. You know, they were just going and playing someone else's songs and playing somewhere and trying to trying to get an acceptable level of, I can't think of the word, of compromise in terms of their own repertoire that would sort of work in those places. And, not every gig was good for those. You tend to think, we tend to sort of like think, if you throw it forward another 20, 30 years, the Jam, in England were going playing in these places, and they were from the word go, their repertoire was accepted as these great 20 songs, but they were playing in places where people didn't like them or didn't know them or whatever. It's just something that happens throughout history, and I don't say that every country is the same or every period of time is the same in its acceptance or its preparedness to accept a new band and a new style and a new repertoire. But that is always going to be the case. I can go and I can look at a 25-day tour of Australia. For me now, as an artist who's been playing for 30 years, and I can still look at it and go, there are going to be nights on that tour when you're going to play to people who don't give a stuff about what you do or what you've written or who you are. But my problem in that regard is that they're probably going to want to hear Father's Day, and they're probably going to wish that I'd just play Father's Day every 5 songs the rest of the night, because they're kind of lame brains and they're too stupid to realise that the other stuff you've got might be as good, or certainly in the same vein and have a lot of the same attributes, but people have that sort of desire to for recognition, in terms of, and it can, as long as it's not mean, and it can be really mean, because people can be so nasty about this stuff. But as long as it's an acceptable emotion for people to want to hear something they know. That's acceptable as long as they're not nasty about it. I think it's permissible as an attitude.
They probably go home and say, I tell you what, that Mick Thomas bloke does a really, really good cover of Wedding Party Murphy. He's very, very good at it. So when did the penny drop, Mick, that you could do this as a proper thing rather than, part-time? There's a lot of guys out there with guitars and other instruments who think, I'll just go and play up on a pub on Packington Street in Geelong West. When did the penny drop?
Look, I think that the landscape was kind of different in we're sort of talking the mid-80s, I think, there was one really big difference that I can tell you as a professional musician. You played universities in those days, and it wasn't that's, you might think that doesn't mean much, but it was quite massive as a band trying to tour and trying to play as a professional thing. That was kind of your best paid gig. So even back then in, say, even as far back as the late 70s, or 1980, you'd play. I'd play Deakin Uni a couple of times a year, and they were your best paid gigs, some union night, or you get to play lunchtimes. And then when we started touring, you're in Melbourne, you're playing RMIT, and you're playing Monash, and you're playing La Trobe, and you're playing Melbourne Uni. And then when we got on the national stage, so there was a little bit more money around in those days. So I guess, I'll be really up front with you. We went off the bowl in 1986 when Away Away was released as a single, and it was like the accountant just said, guys, you're releasing a single on a multinational record company. You're going to be played on. You are going to get done if you don't go off the dole now. You cannot have the profile that you guys are seeking and still be on the dole. So that was the point at which I became a professional musician, right? 1986. Yep. My aspiration to do that was way before that. And I reckon, like I say, by playing at universities and playing constantly, I look back to the Never Never Band, and we played a lot. We were probably doing our 50, 60 gigs a year in that band. So I was probably playing every week in that band, which is so I had aspirations to do that then. It wasn't until, that moment of saying, well, my income is going to be 100% derived from playing music. And I've pretty much kept to that since then, and people around me have kind of come along for the ride for various periods of that. So in that 30-year period, and people sort of make the decisions that they make in terms of their life, not in any casual way, but it's just, I think it's what works for people. So if someone chooses to top up their income, it's like, it's a great scene in Woody Allen's Annie Hall, where someone says, I'm an actress, I'm a musician, and he says, no, you're not, you're a waitress, no, you're not, you're a bartender, and he's sort of looking at how people define themselves. But I think, even if someone's income is, 70-80% derived from something outside of music, if their guiding passion and it's done credibly and not with any sense of of trying to snow people, I think that's still within the realms of acceptable kind of human behaviour to say, well, I'm a musician, even if that's not what gives you your total income. I think there's still people who they might teach a bit, they might work behind a bar or work in a restaurant, or do all those sort of occupations that people tend to do around music, because it's a disruptive kind of thing to do in your life. So, it doesn't really suit people to be, working in a public service job or whatever, because, you're going to have to go away a fair bit. But so I still think it's pretty acceptable if someone says, yeah, look, I'm a musician. I might make 100% of my income from being, from music. But I don't know. So I'm lucky enough to say that since 1986, I'm a musician.
Mick, putting bands together is interesting because you yourself have a unique style. So whether it be the Never Never Band or Weddings, Parties, anything, or your latest stuff, when you're putting a band together, it's not just a case of saying, come on, boys, we're going to go and play some rock and roll, because you then say, oh, and we're going to have a piano accordion in here as well. It's obviously difficult to find people who want to go on the same music journey as you, or was it easy?
It's easier when you got the money to pay them.
Yeah, okay.
like really, that's look at. I don't think I've ever done anything that's kind of musically, super difficult. So it's just a matter of finding the people who really want the gig, and that's been easier sometimes than others. But I don't think that the problem's ever been stylistically based. It's more to do with the lifestyle choices, and really, even now, in say if I look at the past 10 years of my life, and I guess at this stage I'm kind of after a level of proficiency, which cuts a lot of people out. So you want people who are really decent players, and then therefore I guess what I'm sort of looking for these days is you want people who have made that decision that they're going to be musicians, and like I said, whether they make 60, 70 or 100% of their income via playing music, it tends to preclude a lot of people, because I just don't want to play with, I'm a bit over people wrestling with their quandary about, what they want to do in their life. I want people who are career musicians at this stage of the game, and there's been points in my life when that didn't worry me as much. But stylistically, it's never been a problem. I've always been able to convince people that, this is a good enough thing to do.
Mm.
So looking at the latest incarnation, there's a big word for a Saturday morning, Mick Thomas's Roving Commission, and a new album that you've is it out yet, or is it coming out? I didn't quite catch that one.
It's out for, in whatever. It's even in you asking that, it's quite an interesting concept when you say, is a record out, because I haven't I just haven't gotten off my bum to put it on the streaming services yet, because there's just kind of so little reward in that for me, and I don't even want to get into the whole argument about streaming, and people go, oh my God, streaming's this, streaming's that, and people go, oh, streaming, people go, streaming works for me. I go, yeah, of course it works for you, because for $12 a month, you don't have to make any choices in your life. So yeah, sure, it works for you. You just put a song into Spotify, and my biggest objection to the whole concept, and I do have a stance on this. My biggest objection is it's not the paltry remuneration that happens. That you only make virtually nothing off it. My biggest objection to it is the algorithm. And it stops people making active decisions about what they're going to listen to and how they're going to listen to it, and the format, and it stops them being sort of critical. And because if you don't pay for something, then and look, let's call a spade a spade. You're not paying for music when you pay $12 a month for Spotify. You're putting some money into a rich person's pocket, because the musicians aren't getting anything, right? So if you're not making that active decision to support music, then you can't really judge it, can you? You can't really qualify it and say, well, I don't like the way this band's presenting, I don't like what they're doing, because, who cares? You just listen to the next thing that the algorithm throws at you. And
hold on for 3.5 minutes and you'll have something different.
Yeah, by the end of the day, the algorithm's thrown enough at you that you've heard a couple of tunes that you like, and you just, like a sated sort of zombie sitting there going, oh yeah, I heard something that I like, and the chances are it's going to be Dance Monkey or some pile of rubbish, just something that's just a thing, So that's my real objection to it. Whereas I kind of think, well, the people that keep me alive, that float my boat, financially and, sense of my kind of creative morale, are people who make this active choice, that they're still supporting Mick Thomas after all these years. They still come up to the merch desk and buy a record, or they go on Bandcamp and they buy, the vinyl, or they buy this, or they buy, or they buy some, merchandise trinket, a tea towel or a bottle opener or something like that. And that floats me, keeps me going. They get a track, they listen to the track, they comment on it, I go to a gig. I know that I go to a gig, I have a pretty firm grasp on the fact that people want to hear a lot of old stuff, but, there's a trade-off. I get to play a few new songs. It's not much, I know when Bob Dylan or whoever gets up to play, they're going to play X amount of old stuff, X amount of new stuff. You rotate it through. That's the way it's always kind of been. And I consider myself really lucky to be in that position to still be playing and still be doing stuff. But it's only by virtue of those people who make that active decision.
Well, we're going to encourage people to buy this new album at the end of this, so we'll ask you where you can find it shortly. But The album's called City's Calling Me. The thing I really like, and unfortunately Rob and I do this, as you can probably tell, on a voluntary basis, and this is not our full-time gig, so Rob hasn't had a chance to look at the track listing yet, but I'm loving some of the track listing. Things like High Street Bridge, corner of Bent Street and High, the song we're going to play called Regent to Ruthven. Now, in your mind, is it Ruthven or Ruthven?
Ruthven.
Yeah, see, I know you're a St Kilda man. As an old Fitzroy man, Alan Ruthven won a Brownlow. Alan Ruthven never did. But it's got a real Melbourne feeling to it. Captain Collingwood is another song on the album. It's got a real Melbourne feel to it. Was that the intention to go out and write an album about Melbourne, or is that just how it's come together?
Look, it's mainly covers on the record, and they're all just songs that I became aware of during the second lockdown, when they had the really strict, and that's not what we're in at the moment, the 5 kilometre radius of your home. And I just kind of wanted, it was just like a bit of a fetish at the time, just to think about a bunch of songs that were within that 5 kilometre radius. And, it wasn't the only criteria, but, I just realised that there was a few songs on there that had never been recorded by the artists, like the Chuck Jenkins song, Keeping the Cannons Clean. Well, he'd never recorded that. Captain Collingwood's Pete Lawler, who used to play in the weddings. he'd never recorded that. So I was just aware of these songs that were lying around, and that I had any amount of songs that could come into that same criteria of just from where I was living at the time. And I just wanted to be really, really small and focused, and just my little postcard to the rest of the world, from my little sort of restrained area. So, it was no big deal, but it was just like it wasn't like this area is better than that area. It was just like, here's a bunch of songs I can look at that are really, really focused to a place and a time, and they just, for me, just a really good bunch of songs to sing.
And a really good cover of the Mighty Chisels as well, with Forever Now. So the album City's Calling Me, where can people buy a copy of the album, Mick, either as a download or in the physical sense?
Look, there's a thing called Bandcamp, which I don't know how across that a lot of people are, but if you go to bandcamp.com, there was a really beautiful article written, I think it was in the New York Times, about a year ago, and it was called The Tale of Two Platforms, and the graphic they had for it was a railway track that was forking two different ways, and the article was about Bandcamp and Spotify, and it was saying they were the two diametrically opposed music platforms. And whilst I still have, I'm still a published artist. I'm still signed to Mushroom Music and all that. Bandcamp just really works for me at this point in time. You can sell music and merchandise through there, and if you go under there, there's a whole lot of other bands who are doing the same thing, and some quite big bands, but they're just incredibly fair and reasonable. Once a month, they waive their fees on a Friday. It's called No Fees Friday. They're just a really interesting proposition in terms of modern music marketing. And aside from that, I sell stuff at gigs, whenever we get to do them these days, which is, gigs will come back. It's like we've had a bit of a kick at the moment, and I'm sort of sitting there and looking at a national tour that's pretty much in tatters, but, it's not the only business that's been impacted, and it'll keep happening, but, we'll get to play some gigs sooner or later, so come and see me at the merch desk or hit me up on Spotify. Up until this record, everything's on Spotify, so, yep. If you're too scungy to shell out a few bucks, have a listen. If you like it, go to Bandcamp, but Bandcamp is a fantastic thing. They still call themselves a streaming service. You get to listen to the album once, and you listen to it a second time, they go, hey, how about coughing up? The third time they go, yep. Nah, you got to cough up. And, you can stream it pretty cheaply. You can buy the stuff, and I think the interaction's great, that you have with people on there. So, that's the best way to get it.
Well, guarantee that you'll sell at least one more copy of City Calling Me today, because I haven't bought my copy yet. I just got the track downloaded from your publicist, so I'll be buying a copy of the album this afternoon. Mick Thomas, thanks for taking out some time on a Saturday morning to talk to us on Two Blokes Chatting radio show, and we're going to send you on your way with the song that you called Regent to Ruthven, and I'm going to call Regent to Ruthven. How's that sound?
That sounds great.
Good on you, Mick. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Mick. All the very best.
Good on you, Mick. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Mick. All the very best.
Good on you, Mick. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Mick. All the very best.
Good on you, Mick. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Mick. All the